One of the most striking aspects of human history is not that people believe in something greater, but that nearly all people across time and geography do. This is not a conclusion derived from argument alone. It is something far older than argument. It is instinctive. A child, before being taught doctrine or philosophy, already asks questions that reach beyond the visible world. Who made the sky? What was there before everything? Where do things go when they disappear? These are not learned questions. They are inherited ones. There seems to be within human nature a deep inclination toward reverence, an internal gravity that pulls awareness upward toward something greater than the self. Even when cultures diverge dramatically in expression, the underlying impulse remains consistent, to acknowledge something higher than individual existence. Some call it order. Some call it source, some call it spirit, some call it mind behind reality, but the direction is the same, upward, outward, beyond the self. Interestingly, early records of human belief do not focus heavily on proving whether the divine exists. They assume it. They explore instead how one should live in relation to it. This suggests something important. Doubt, as a structured philosophical stance, may have developed later than belief itself. In earlier stages of human culture, the question was not, is there meaning? The question was, how do we live in alignment with meaning? Only later did systematic skepticism emerge of a formal position, and with it came a shift from participation in meaning to analysis of meaning, from lived reverence to detached observation. This shift brought clarity in some areas, but also distance, because something changes when the human mind begins to stand outside of its own intuition and examine it as if it were foreign. The sense of unity becomes fragmented. The world becomes an object to be explained rather than a reality to be lived within. And yet, even in this shift, something remains unchanged, the persistent human inclination toward transcendence. Even skepticism often carries within it a kind of longing, a desire not merely to deny meaning, but to ensure that if meaning exists, it is honest, coherent, and real. One of the most compelling observations in the study of human civilization is this: no known culture has ever existed without some form of sacred recognition. As noted by ancient observers, one might find societies without writing systems, without formal governance, without currency or architecture, but never a society entirely without reverence. There is always something placed above ordinary life, a symbol, a force, a presence, a sky, a spirit. Even when expressed through myth, ritual, or symbolic narrative, the structure remains. Human beings orient themselves towards something greater than themselves. The philosopher Plutarch once observed that while many human institutions can be absent in certain societies, the absence of reverence itself is nearly impossible to find. This observation is not a proof in the strict logical sense, but it is a pattern. And patterns in human universality often point towards something deeply embedded in nature itself. Similarly, the philosopher Aristotle reflected on how widely held beliefs, especially those shared across both educated and uneducated populations, carry a kind of probability that cannot be dismissed lightly. not because majority opinion is always correct, but because shared intuition across independent minds suggests something fundamental in human perception. If one observes carefully, belief in something greater does not begin as an intellectual conclusion. It begins as experience. A moment of awe when looking at the night sky, a sudden awareness of insignificance within vast beauty, a feeling of moral accountability even when no human observer is present, a quiet conviction that kindness is not merely preference but somehow aligned with reality itself. These experiences arise without instruction. They are spontaneous, and they point towards something important. Human consciousness is not only analytical, it is also responsive to meaning. It does not merely calculate the world, it feels its significance. This is why purely mechanical explanations of existence often feel incomplete to many minds, not because they are incorrect in detail, but because they do not address the deeper question of meaning. A universe described only in terms of motion and matter may explain structure, but not significance. And human beings do not merely want structure, they want meaning that feels real. When the sense of higher meaning becomes unclear or disconnected, history shows a consistent pattern. Human beings do not stop seeking the sacred, they replace it. If the original source of reverence becomes obscured, symbols of power, wealth, ideology, identity, or control arise. These become new centers of devotion, not always consciously, but functionally. Anything that occupies the highest place in human attention begins to act as a form of worship. This is why, even in modern contexts where traditional expressions of reverence may weaken, new forms of absolute attachment emerge. Human nature does not cease to seek something ultimate. It simply redirects its longing, and in doing so, it often reveals an important truth. The need for something greater is not easily removed. It is part of the structure of consciousness itself. When something is widely recognized across cultures, eras, and intellectual levels, it becomes worth examining not as superstition, but as data. If only a small group of individuals believed in something, it might be dismissed as isolated imagination. But when millions upon millions, separated by time and geography, arrive independently at a similar intuition, the question becomes more complex. It suggests that human awareness may be tuned to certain kinds of truths, not perfectly, but consistently enough to warrant attention. Not everything universally believed is correct, but not everything universally dismissed is false either. There exists a middle ground, a space of probability shaped by shared experience. As Aristotle suggested, what is widely affirmed across humanity carries a kind of persuasive weight that should not be lightly ignored, not as proof, but as indication. At the heart of this entire reflection lies a deeper question. Why does meaning feel real at all? Why does justice feel higher than preference? Why does love feel more than chemistry? Why does truth feel binding even when inconvenient? If existence were purely accidental in the most reductionist sense, these qualities would be difficult to account for. But they persist. Not as illusions easily dismissed, but as central experiences of being human. It is here that the idea of a higher grounding of reality often arises, not as an escape from reason, but as an attempt to preserve coherence between experience and explanation. The sense that reality is not indifferent to meaning, but structured in a way that allows meaning to exist. Perhaps the question is not simply whether the divine exists as an external object to be proven or disproven. Perhaps the deeper question is this: why does the human mind so consistently reach beyond itself? Why does it seek unity in a fragmented world? Why does it feel so persistently that existence is pointing somewhere? Even in doubt, the question remains alive. And perhaps that is the most important observation of all. The human search for meaning does not disappear under scrutiny. It deepens. And so the reflection continues, not as conclusion, but as ongoing awareness, a quiet recognition that some questions are not meant to be closed quickly. They are meant to be lived with. And in that living, something essential remains. The sense that existence is not merely something we observe, but something that observes us back. Not in fear, not in control, but in silent invitation to wonder, to seek, to understand. And so, as this reflection comes to a close, we are left not with final answers, but with quiet questions that continue to live within us. Perhaps that is how deeper truths are meant to be carried, not as conclusions we own, but as thoughts we gently walk with through life. In a world that often moves too fast, it is rare to pause, to look inward, and to wonder about the greater meaning behind it all. So tonight, as you step away from this video and into your own quiet space, carry this thought with you: that your search for meaning is not empty, your questions are not forgotten, and your awareness of something greater is part of what makes you deeply human. Let the noise of the day settle, let your mind grow still, and let your thoughts rest without pressure to solve everything at once. There is time to understand, time to grow, time to see more clearly. For now, simply breathe and be at peace with the mystery of existence.